All right, Woodshed number 3. I'm John Lamberton. Today we're going to be continuing from Woodshed number 2, where we discussed permutational potency and started to apply it to 4-note chords. And so we're just going to resume with that. And I'm going to try to do a little bit more of a clear explanation of what this looks like in terms of like actually being, immersed in the material. So in this lesson, we're going to basically talk about the 6 voicing types of the 24 permutations that you can do per 4-note set. And then we'll talk about how there are 4 inversions of each of those voicings, equaling 24 total. So, the term inversion here is maybe a little bit misleading, but we'll get into that in a second. And then lastly, we're going to talk about incorporating the different chord qualities using scales so that you don't sort of favor one type of chord quality and always drill things out of context. And this will be shaping us up and preparing us for the Mick Goodrick style voice leading that I've been talking about. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's actually start with inversions before we get to the different voices, though, or voicings rather. So when I say inversion, I don't mean it in the sense of flipping something upside down. This is definitely an appropriate way to use the term invert or inversion in music, but that would be more like, used in serial music. I'm not talking about, this type of inversion, basically. It's not about upside downness. So, as I said, it could be used in serial music. So on the left here, we see this matrix of a 12-tone, row of pitches. And so if you go left to right, then that gives you the prime form. If you go right to left, that gives you the retrograde, so just the reverse. And if you go downward, so starting here on the left in this blue rectangle, you have 8, 4, 5, A, B, 3, 7, etc. And if you start in that same spot on the left with the 8 and then go downward, that's the inversion. And this allows you to then, apply the same thing backwards. And so if you start down there at the 2 and you go upward, then that's reverse inversion, or retrograde inversion. So, in serial music, they're talking about prime inversion, retrograde inversion, etc. I'm talking a little bit more along the lines of something like a rotation or, translation maybe. But even those aren't really the best terms. And so let me just show you what I'm talking about because, we talk about inversions, but it's still not a great term for this. So in purple here, it's basically showing you how like a sort of cue that would cycle around works. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So essentially 1 is the first in line. And once you go to the next inversion, you scooch that up. You move it across so it's at the end of the line. So now you have 2, 3, 4, 1. Then you do the same thing. Move the 2 to the end. You have 3, 4, 1, 2. So this isn't really flipping it upside down per se. It's more just sort of rotating it around a cue, and then after 4 rotations, or after you've rotated 3 times to get 4 different varieties, then it'll return to the original, but it'll be up an octave. So when we move something over to the right, it's essentially moving it up an octave. So, front of the line moves to the back of the line, goes up an octave. Okay, so in the case of a C major 7 chord, instead of just 1, 2, 3, 4, that gives us C, E, G, B. This isn't, necessarily, like, depending on how you define prime, this isn't necessarily the most closed way to arrange this. If you wanted the smallest sort of, set of intervals, it would be B, C, E, G. So, the total span of that would be a, like a 8 semitone interval, but this has an 11 semitone interval from the C to the B. But that's not important right now. We're basically going to apply that same idea of rotating it around, but with these actual notes. So the C, the first note, goes up an octave to the, quote, end of the line. So it looks like that, scooches over. Now we have E, G, B, C. And so our first note is E, and that means we are in first inversion. Okay, so this is what it looks like in notation. See that bottom C on the first bar, that moves up an octave. And now you have this, E, G, B, C chord. Cool. So now you can repeat this for all the different inversions. And so let's go ahead and do it again, but we're going to apply the same concept to the first inversion. So what will that give us? In terms of name, it's the second inversion. Yep. So do it again. What do we get? Third inversion. So left to right here is prime inversion, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. And don't get confused. The first inversion is basically the second thing that has the third in the root. But this is all kind of complicated. The important thing is to get a familiarity with the sonorities here, and get these under your hands. At the end of the day, we don't want to be sitting around saying, "Oh, that's in the second inversion." Like that's helpful for talking about it, before or after in a theoretical manner, but we don't need to be talking about it like that, and indefinitely. So we got prime, first, second, and third inversions. Cool. Okay, so now that we have inversions out of the way, let's talk about the 6 different voicing types, and they are close. I like to say closed. I guess the idea is that all the pitches are close together, but I think of it as a closed voicing. But Mick Goodrick says close, so whatever. I'm going to call it close here. Then we have drop 2, drop 3, drop 2 and 3, drop 2 and 4, and double drop 2 and drop 3. Okay. So basically, this is similar to the idea of inversion, but instead of sort of rotating it so that the first thing is now at the end, going up an octave, we're going to say, to create a drop 2, we're going to take the second voice down from the top, and we're going to drop it an octave. Okay, so on the left here with the closed voicing or close voicing, we have C, E, G, B, and we take the second voice down, that G, and move it down an octave. And so that's our drop 2 voicing. So now we can see it's pretty much the same, but it has a lower G, and so that gives us, instead of being like a major third and then a minor third and then another major third, it's from bottom to top a perfect fourth, a major third, and then a perfect fifth. So it's much more spread out. It has some more resonant intervals in it, and it still has that major third, but the other ones are going to be a totally different sound because it's basically just third on third on third, and so they're all close together. Gives it a different way of having the pitches relate to one another in terms of adjacency. So now if we applied the same idea with a drop 3, you're going to take that E and drop it down an octave instead of the G. So now that's our drop 3, and so again on the left it's a major third between C and E, minor third between E and G, and then major third between G and B. And then over here on the right with the drop 3, it's basically a minor sixth, or like 8 semitones, then 7 semitones, a perfect fifth, and then a major third. So while on the left the whole spread is basically 11 semitones, this is going to be, what is it, 19 semitones. Okay, so that's significantly bigger. It has 8 more semitones of distance. But unlike the drop 2 where there was that perfect fifth, there's that perfect fourth, and then the major third, this has a perfect fifth, a major third, and a minor sixth. Okay, so after I was typing this up, I literally was looking at the word drop, wondering if I was spelling it wrong, because there's just so many drops. So drop, 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 drop it like it's hot takes. Okay, so my hot take here is that these labels aren't that important or useful. No disrespect to Mick Goodrick. These are, his book is brilliant, and it is helpful to label them as something. But basically the type of person who's going to be super picky about making sure that you say, oh, that's actually a double drop 2, drop 3, or whatever, that's the type of person who probably, isn't really comfortable with these. And maybe I'm making assumptions or generalizations, but drop 2 and drop 3 voicings are very much the most common, because, at least on guitar, because they're the most playable. And they do have some nice sonic characteristics. But when it comes to like the double drop 2, drop 3, or the drop 2, drop 3, drop 2, drop 2, drop 4, those aren't commonly used. And for guitar, even closed voicings aren't used. It's typically drop 2 or drop 3. So this has to do with the playability on the instrument. But anyway, basically, I think the important thing here is to familiarize yourself with the different sonic characteristics. And that has to do with how spread out it is. And basically the interval relationships between adjacent tones. So I have an example here on the left with these blue boxes. You basically see that there's a perfect fifth, and then if you go up, there's another perfect fifth. And so those two basically power chords are separated with a, what is that? Hard to tell with the boxes where the ledger lines are. So that is it's a major sixth. So it's basically perfect fifth, major sixth, another perfect fifth. So it's very spread out, but it has pretty resonant intervals between adjacent tones. Now, if we look at this middle voicing here with the kind of light purple circle around it, or oval, you get a minor second, so just a single semitone, followed by a major third, followed by a minor third. So when you get that the B and the C right next to each other in that voicing, it's going to create that sort of wavering beat quality from just the small difference in frequency. And when you do the one on the left with all the fifths in it, basically, it's going to have a much more rich sort of clear interval relationship, because the perfect fifth is basically, that's saying that the top interval, or the top note, is 50% higher. It's a 3-to-2 relationship, so it's a pretty low integer relationship, while the B to the C isn't as obvious of an interval relationship, or frequency relationship at least. So it's going to be kind of I actually really like these chords. They're somewhat hard to play on guitar, but they have this kind of shimmery sort of quality from all the beats that come from the small differences in frequency. And then over here on the right, we basically see that it's a combination of the two. You have some fiftiness, and you have a minor second there between the B and the C. So it's going to be, resonant with the fifths and all, but it's also going to have that sort of shimmery quality. And this is a popular one. It's nice, sort of multi-purpose chord. Like, you could use this substitute over an A bass note for like an A minor 9 or whatever. That's the drop 2 voicing there. The middle one, for anybody that's interested, the middle one is a closed voicing in third inversion, and the one on the left that would be a double, or sorry, that's a drop 2, drop 4, and yeah, I mean, basically, you see what I'm getting at. Like, I know this voicing very well. I can play it all over the fretboard, all over the key centers, with different qualities. But I don't remember if it's a drop 2 or a drop, a drop 2, drop 3, or drop 2, drop 4. Drop, 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 drop. Okay, so let's look through these voicings and their inversions. So I'm just gonna put an E flat major to get us out of this obvious C major. We got on the left here just the prime inversion, or the prime ordering of a closed E flat major 7, so E flat G, B flat D. And we basically just apply that same operation of moving the bottom note to the top. Take the second one, which is a first inversion closed E flat major chord, and you move that G that's in the bottom to the top, and again to get the third inversion. So a little note for guitarists: some of these are going to be really difficult. Some of them will be impossible unless you have some sort of trickery. If you involve like a right hand tap, or like I've seen people try to use their nose to fret a note, or tons of people use like open strings to try to get some of these that wouldn't otherwise be possible. That's really cool. Like John Stoll's great at that. Ryan Ferreira's great at that. Ben Monder's great at that. Some of these basically you can do with a gazillion different fingerings. You can do those fingerings on a bunch of different varieties of string sets too. So each of these will have its own sort of sonic character. Like, if you use the same sort of way of fretting it on one string set versus a lower string set, the lower string set might be warmer, the higher might be sort of crisper. There might be intonation issues with one and not with the other. You'll get some different timbral qualities, which is really cool. And I was thinking of including tabs or like chord diagrams here, but I felt like that would actually be a disservice to any guitarists because, I want y'all to get a crack at getting these under your hands and under your fingers on your own because there are just so many ways to play them. Like, even this first E flat major chord, you could fret that G, you could do it as an open string, you could, do that high D on the 12th fret of the D string, or you could, do it as a harmonic even. Like, the point here is to get the concept so that you can essentially download like a biological harmonic encyclopedia, if you will. And you want to be just immersed in the potential of chords. You don't want to be just sitting there and being like, here's the answer that John gave me, because there are a gazillion ways to play it. So I don't want you to get distracted by one way of playing it, because that's kind of that's against the spirit of this. So now let's look at drop twos. They ascend like that with the inversions again, and they have a little bit different spacing. Drop three here. But actually, let's hear what each of these sounds like. So we got the closed. Okay, and then let's hear the drop two. And here's the drop three. All right, and now these are the ones that start to get weird. This one, the drop two, drop fours are nice because they still have that very 50 sort of quality to them. They have a lot of spread too. So there isn't much, like, the notes that would otherwise sort of compete with each other because they're nearby, they don't really compete together. So they have a totally different sonority. I also really like playing these on lower string sets. It gets a nice warm sound. So let's hear these chords. All right, and now we have double drop two, drop three. Okay, and so this one's a little bit weird, and these have a ton of different fingerings that get different qualities. So I would explore different options of playing them. So let's hear this set of chords. Okay, and then we have drop two, drop three. Okay, so now let's talk about moving these through diatonic scales. While you can just say, okay, let's drill E major 7th chords and go through all 24 versions of them, or let's try all 6 voicing types of, D major 7 and then go through the inversions. That's cool and all, and that can help you if you're just sort of trying to get some traction with this, but I think that it's important to actually move these through something that you would have a sense of context with, where there's, there are other chord qualities. And so, of course, if you harmonize a major scale and triads, and you sort of extend that to harmonizing it in 4-part tertian chords like these 7th chords here, then if you ascend, you would get E flat major 7, and then you move that up pretty much all in parallel, except some of them move up a little bit more than the others. You get the F minor 7, move that up entirely in parallel to G minor 7, then mostly in parallel again to A flat major 7, then up to B flat dominant 7, and then up again to C minor 7, and then D half diminished, or D minor 7 flat 5, and then back to E flat. So in this case, you get major 7th qualities, you get minor 7 qualities, you get dominant 7 qualities, and you get minor 7 flat 5. Cool. So, like I mentioned, basically there's a sort of, everything in general is moving upwards. Like, these chords functionally are moving upwards in some respect, but not all the voices move exactly in parallel, and that's what gives us these different chord qualities. So, the E flat and the B flat in E major 7 at the beginning, those would both move up a whole step to F and C, but then the G and the B would only move up a half step to A flat and E flat. So, there's some parallels, but it's not entirely parallel. Now, this progression is basically what Mick Goodrick, in his excellent encyclopedia of chords and voice leading, the Good Chord series, would call a cycle 2. And I don't think this is that confusing, but just to make sure that everyone's clear, the reason this is a cycle 2 instead of like a cycle 1, even though it's moving up one step, is because each single step is a generalized second. So like when we talk about set theory and we talk about chromatic stuff, it sort of requires that we talk about things in a different way. We talk about intervals more in how many semitones there are, but when we're talking about diatonic scales, everything is in a kind of generic or generalized intervallic system. So, saying in the case of E flat major, E flat to F, that's going up a second, but similarly, going from G to A flat is also a second. So it's a generalized second instead of an absolute second or like an absolute semitone, because it's dynamic and it depends on what scale you're using. So you could also apply this same concept with any sort of scale. So like you could say an E flat, Lydian flat 2 scale or whatever. And so the next one would be an F flat something or other chord. But basically you're just sticking within the mother set of the scale using these generic or these generalized interval structures. So applying the same idea, if we were to do a cycle 4 instead of cycle 2, that would actually be a pretty familiar one. And that would mean going from like E flat major 7 to A flat major 7 to D minor 7 flat 5 to G minor 7 to C minor 7 to F minor 7 to B flat dominant 7, and then back to E flat major 7. And so basically, once you've gotten comfortable with moving around these types of chords, I would start using just a single voicing, like probably drop 2 or drop 3, depending on your instrument. For guitarists, I'd suggest starting with a drop 3 or drop 2 if you are feeling slightly more ambitious. They're both relatively easy, but I think a few more people would struggle with drop 2s. And so once you get comfortable with the voicing, then you do its inversions and you move it through a diatonic scale. But you could also just say, like, take the drop 2 chord and move that up throughout the scale. And that, even though it's not getting any inversions in, that will show you all the different types of chord qualities for that style of chord voicing and that spread of voicing. But then we're going to eventually go beyond this. And so, like I said, the scale here, the cycle 2 is going upward overall. Like, just if you look at these abstract sort of chords and, their symbols as like, E flat sign maj 7, where it doesn't actually tell you the absolute voicing. Abstractly, it's moving upward. There's an upward trend. But ultimately, this is going to sound kind of obvious. And if we apply the same idea to, say, a cycle 4, then if you just move everything up a fourth, you're going to quickly run out of fretboard or keyboard or whatever. So instead, you want to do, basically you want to have less motion in the way that you voice things, so that the way that the voices move is more of like weaving and less just all moving up and then moving up again. We don't want all the voices to move exactly in the same direction. We want to have maybe some voices stay the same, maybe one voice jumps down, maybe one voice jumps way down, maybe one goes mildly up or something like that. And so Goodrick discusses this in his book, and we'll talk about this more when we dive further into voice leading. But your homework for the next lesson is to basically figure out how you can do the cycle 2 progression, where you go from E flat major 7 to F minor 7 to G minor 7, where all the chords are moving up, but you want all of the voicings and the sort of like little melodies that are in there from just the way that the inner voices move around. You want the whole thing in general to move downward. And you might say, well, how do you do that? And basically the answer is to use those 4 inversions. Okay, so you aren't going to be using like one type of voicing and doing the same inversion moving up the way that you would if you're just moving up with the scale. Instead, you want to have the inversion sort of swap around, and you'll see that there's like this interesting nuanced pattern to it. So, dive into this, see how it goes for you. Let me know in the comments. And to just conclude and review what we just talked about, with 4 note chords, you can voice them 24 different ways. And of those 24 options, you can break them into 6 voicing types. The voicing types are basically drop this, drop that, drop the other, drop them, drop those, etc. And, the names aren't really important. I would say, no shade to Goodrick. I'm sure that he doesn't think that they're that important either. They're just a way to describe something. But it's more important to familiarize yourself and really like immerse yourself in the way that they behave, because they're these interesting, pretty predictable dynamics that you'll soon get into your fingers that are beyond just the chord voicings. You'll see how they work together, and it's a really cool thing. And in the intro to his book, he basically says that some people might pick this up immediately. Some people, it might be a painstaking process. So, see how it goes for you. You just want to familiarize yourself with the sonic character, though, of each chord, because some will be shimmery, some will be more like warm. They all have different applications, basically. Now, each of these voicings has 4 quote inversions, and again, this isn't like flipping upside down inversion, but you have prime, first and second and third inversion, and these when you take these chords and move them through diatonic scales, that's a good way to sort of avoid favoring just one chord quality by drilling simply, all the variations of that one chord. Instead, I would say to, pick a chord voicing type, like say drop 2 or drop 4, and practice inverting it, and then practice moving it through different cycles, ideally with some motion that's contrary to the way that the cycle moves. So if you have, a cycle 2, that's essentially the opposite of a cycle 7, and you want to have a cycle 2's motion all moving downward, and a cycle 7's all to move upward. So yeah, that's your homework for next week, or for the next lesson. So let me know how it goes, and I'll see you in lesson 4. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment on the video. Let me know what you think. If you have any requests for other lessons or any feedback or anything like that, I'm very receptive to that and would like to know what you think. And also leaving a thumbs up is very helpful. It helps with the algorithm and all that. If you'd like to support the creation of this type of content, or my podcast, Bridge Podcast with John Lamberton, head over to patreon.com. Options start off as low as a few bucks a month, and it's a great way to support me and encourage me to keep on doing this. So it's always appreciated, and thanks for watching.